Really cool stuff.
Very cool.
Clock and let's rock the boat. So guys, thank you so much to be here. It's a pleasure for me to have Jason here. Thank you all to take the time and spend 1 hour here with us. The goal of this webinar is for you to learn a little bit more about what Lean Change Management is. I have been using Lean Change Management now for a couple of years. Couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I become a trainer as well, and I want to spread more and more this fantastic tool that Jason created. So that's why I brought Jason into this webinar. I will do a small introduction because some of you do not know, some of you came from my side, but some of you come from Jason. So I will do a small introduction very fast, just for you to know who I am. My name is Luis Gonçalves. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Evolution for All. This is a business management consulting helping executive leaders to create agile and innovative organizations. I started Agile, or I started to work with Agile back in 2003, where I was lucky enough to be working in Nokia in Finland, and at that time Nokia joined the Scrum movement, and I was part of it. So I've been working with Scrum and Agile methodology now for almost 15 years. And this is just the beginning. This is so cool. I wrote as well a book together with Ben Linders about Agile retrospectives, and this is how I got even more connected to the rest of the community. And yeah, I'm here to host the webinar with Jason, and I hope you really enjoy. Jason, I'm going to pass it to you. Thank you so much, man. Could you just introduce a bit? I could introduce you, but I think it would not be enough for what you are doing to the community. So please take a couple of minutes and tell us who you are and why are you here and what do you want to teach us today.
Okay, so my name is Jason Little. I started my career as actually in IT support, so at a call center, and then got into programming, and I think I'm still the world's greatest Cold Fusion developer. Surprisingly enough, I told that story in an organization once, and they kind of looked at me with a stone face, and they said, we still have some critical systems that are built using that. I'm like, oh. Okay. But anyway, yeah. So started in IT support, got into development, then into project management, and probably since the early 2000s, I've been involved in Agile. So I discovered it 2004-ish, I think. And once I discovered it, it just turned out that a lot of what was in Agile practices was the way that I had been working in some of the organizations that I worked for. So it just kind of felt like the right thing to do. So I started helping organizations with Agile, and eventually ran into a pretty big organizational change wall, which sort of prompted me to start to look at the organizational development community and the change communities. So I've spent the last number of years just working in the white space between different communities and helping people stitch ideas together from different communities, because sometimes we tend to stick within our own communities and try to reinvent things that we could just, if we look over at that change world over there, they've got a few ideas that we can poach that will help us move our organizations forward. So that's really been the focus, my focus anyway, for the last number of years.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I said this to already a couple of you. So the way how we're going to structure this webinar will be a very informal way. So I got a bunch of questions to Jason that I will pose to him during this webinar. This will last like more or less 45 minutes of chatting, and then we will have 15-20 minutes at the end so that you guys can pose your questions. The way how you are going to collect the questions are very simple. So you just go to this website that it's on the screen, sleep.do, and put the code N395, and then you are driven to a small interface where you can basically pose your questions during the webinar. Jason has access to it, and you will basically collect all the questions, and at the end we will take the questions so that we can answer all your questions. In case we are not able to answer the questions, just drop us an email and we'll take care of answering your questions. I'm going to stop the presentation so that we can kind of be in a full screen. It's much better and for the guys. So Jason, I will start with a curious one, because this I did not know. We talked already for some time, but I still don't know. Can you briefly describe what, of course, lean change management is, that I know, but I would like to know as well, how did you end up writing a book about it, and what did actually push you to write this book to the community?
Sure. So nowadays I like to call lean change management an action-biased collection of ideas that are designed to help you get your change unstuck. It's taken 5 or 6 years for that tweet to sort of emerge. The book originally, I guess, really started close to a decade ago. And in the book, in chapter 3, I actually talk about, should this be called a framework or a method or a model or a process? And just for the sake of continuity and making the book easier to read, I refer to it as a model, but it's not really a model, because we've got a century's worth of, we've got Plan, Do, Check, Act. We've got a century's worth of process models to help people with change in leadership and business. So do we really need to invent anything new? Maybe, maybe not. So the idea was that really what's different nowadays is we need more of a bias towards action, just because of the pace of change. So we can't really rely on the 6 months sitting in a room planning everything out completely, because the world around us has changed. So that's why I like to call it an action-biased collection of ideas. So some people, when they come to a workshop, they expect to see like a big diagram or something like that, or a step-by-step kind of approach. The whole intent is to build your own contextual approach for change on this core set of action-biased ideas. So for anybody who's a developer, if you've ever integrated an API or worked with an API or buy one from another company, usually what they do is they give you some type of what is called a reference application. So here's the API, here's a reference application of what it would look like implemented. I like to refer to lean change management sort of as the API. So build your own thing on top of it based on your organization. So if you're an 80,000 person bank, you need a little more process, you need a little more structure. If you're a 100 person media company, you probably don't need any structure when it comes to your change method, for example. It's easier to get all 100 people in a room than to deal with that big of a change. So as long as you're biased towards action and you're valuing feedback as input into your plan, was kind of the intent behind the whole thing. The book, yeah, like I said, it started almost a decade ago when I ran face first into an organizational.
It started actually. You got some version in LeanPub first, right? You built something in the beginning in LeanPub.
Yep.
People got some interest, and then you continue from that, right?
Yep. And before that, it was a series of blog posts just based on experiences. And it was really
that reminds mine, because the retrospective book actually came up from a bunch of blog posts from me and Ben. It's very interesting.
It works very well. It's the best way to sort of formulate your thoughts and put some structure around them. And it's, I've kept a diary of every client I've ever worked with. So just notes and assumptions going in, what happened, how it ended, stuff like that, because it always helps you kind of go back and look and explore these patterns. Yeah. So the from that kind of hitting a wall face first in an organization and writing a few posts about, okay, this agile stuff might not be the point. There must be something else out there, which is why I'm getting stuck. And that eventually morphed into a video series. So there was a brand called Live Lessons from Safari Books and Inform IT that Lisa Adkins and I did the first 2 video tutorials. I did mine on agile transformation for 4 steps to organizational change. And that was based on running a session at the big Agile conference in the States. And someone from Pearson Education came up and said, hey, would you write a book on this topic? Because no one's really talking about this in a simple way. So I did nothing with that book, did the video lessons, and then eventually the Lean Pub version came out, I think in 2012, chapter by chapter, which generated interest. And then the full rewrite I did in 2013 and released it in 2014. And the whole intent was to tell the story. That was it. There was no intent to build a brand or a framework or a method or do workshops. It was just, I think we did some pretty cool things as a team, and I want to share that with the world.
But I think most of the times that's how great things happen. So a lot of times and that's how I started my blog as well. So I started my blog exactly to share my experience and try to teach people and help people with their own problems. And then now it's got traction, having like almost 25,000 monthly viewers, which is for a private blog post is quite a lot. It's not a company blog post. So I fully understand. But I think you did the right stuff, because at the end of the day, if what you know and what you are teaching really helps people, for example, doing the whole lean change management training part, it's a great way to spread the word and to really help organizations. And it's really helping. So I started to apply ideas from your book in 2014 when you put the book out. In that time we even exchanged some ideas in some blog posts that I wrote when I was working in Holiday Check at that time. And it's beautiful. It's really something super simple, but extremely powerful. Super interesting.
Cool.
Could you provide, because this is something interesting that I get a lot of questions from, and I think you will be the right person to answer. A lot of people is asking me always, could you please provide me 2-3 main differences between lean change management and traditional change management approaches? What is so different between the traditional approach and the one that you come up with?
I think mostly the popular traditional approaches, whether you want to refer to GE's change acceleration process or ProSize ADKAR or Kotter's 8 steps or any of those other change methods out there, were created pre-internet, more or less. So extremely fast and rapid change of organizations. So the change community generally has always kind of separated out change management from project management, whereas I don't see a difference between the two. It's all just dealing with social systems of people, no matter what type of change it is. So there's been a bit of a struggle of following the process. Traditional approaches tend to say that if the change didn't work, it's because you didn't follow our process right. And they're kind of, at some level, all change is, phased to a certain degree, but they overemphasize, do your plan, do your change readiness, do your stakeholder map, like just very linear project management type of approaches versus, we need to just try some experiments and see how much of our organization breaks over the next few months before we even decide if we want to do this change. So leave it. So the main difference is I like to write about how keep things as informal as possible early on for these big digital and agile transformations that many companies are going through, because you really don't know how much of your organization is going to break until you try to apply agile techniques to all of your company ceremonies, like your annual budgeting, your annual performance appraisals, your quarterly hiring and firings to meet numbers and quotas and stuff. And right or wrong, that stuff happens in big companies. But until you kind of live with those ceremonies over a period of time, you really won't understand how agile might break your organization. So if you use these traditional approaches, they tend to want to figure out all of that uncertainty up front and create mitigation plans for it, which, you need to have those conversations. But the main difference is getting to action sooner, not embracing uncertainty like we like to say in Agile, but reducing uncertainty as much as possible. So the more uncertainty you have, you either have to have smaller experiments and shorter feedback loops or highly disruptive experiments to give you as much insight as possible about how this change is going to affect your organization. So my stuff's more action biased, and traditional approaches tend to be more plan biased.
Yeah. I saw Linda Rising speaking, or I saw several times Linda speaking, but there was one phrase that it was very interesting and I never forgot. She basically says we work with complex systems, so we don't have a clue what will work or not. So what we need to do is poke the system, see how the system reacts, and then draw our own experiments and conclusions out of it.
Right.
This is completely aligning with what you are saying, because most of the time we don't have a clue how the organization will react to the changes. And what you said is completely true. A couple of months ago, I was spending some time with a client, and the client had one of these big management consulting companies inside, and it was hilarious to see some of the people still believe that they can plan change 12 months, 16 months ahead, and believe that the plan will be followed through and everything will happen. So it's completely, I believe, not up to date anymore in our current way of working, in the way how companies work nowadays. Cool. So before asking you if someone wants to start with lean change management, I would even ask you a more basic question. If you would describe in 5 minutes what lean change management is as a model, or what the different steps or framework, whatever you want to call it, how would you explain to the guys that are listening to us what is actually lean change management, and describe the steps that the model has, and how the people can actually apply a bit to it?
As far as what it is, I'd stick with what I mentioned earlier, which is an action biased collection of ideas to help you get unstuck. And any change, you need to start with the basic questions. Why is it important to the organization? Why is it important to people at all levels in the organization? If you're the agile coach or the change person, why is it important to you? What do we know now? What don't we know? Where are we headed, and how are we going to know when we're, number one, marching in the right direction, and number two, when we've got there? So boil away and distill away all of the, what's our urgency for change, and what's our change readiness, and all the technical mumbo jumbo stuff, and really just get right to the whole point. Is at some point a person is either willing to try something different in their organization because they're motivated to do so. That might be for status, that might be for a power play, that might be for making things better, whatever it is, somebody acts. The other way is that they're unwilling to deal with the current problems anymore, and they feel they have to do something. So they act, and then we watch the dominoes fall. We watch the ripple effects get created. So we need to kind of accept that for all change to happen, we need to take some type of action, but we have to start with those basic questions. Right? Why do we want to do this? And do we know what we're in for? And let's go.
Okay, cool. I took the freedom to pick up the very popular picture that I'm going to share now with the guys, and I would ask you to. So, is everyone watching? Can you guys check the picture? The options inside, start here, experiment, and so on. So, what I would like you to explain in 2 or 3 minutes, what is this picture, the insights, option, experiment, prepare, introduce, review cycle? Could you take us through this picture and explain to our audience what is this? Because I feel this is the engine and the most core part of lean change management.
Sure. So insights, where it has, start here in brackets, in the book, I say that you're always thrown into a constant changing reality. So the notion of having a start date, that's just for project management and budgeting purposes, but you're thrown into the middle of a change no matter where you're at. Mm-hmm. So insights is, what do we know about this system that we are wanting to change? That can come from walking around and seeing what's going on, from surveys, from one-on-one interviews, from change readiness assessments, stakeholder maps, a landscape of what the market conditions are that have forced us into doing this change, but it's basically collecting information using sense-making techniques to have enough information to know how to move into options. Now, options are based on what we know. What are some things that we could do? Doesn't mean we will do them yet. It just means, given what we know about where we're at and where we think we want to go, what could we do? And we will have a handful of options. We might have hundreds of options. And we figure out a way to prioritize those by, what's the best bang for the buck? Every change management method out there says you need some type of quick wins, because when you're building software, you can see, feel, and touch software. When you are working on change, it's all up here. You can't see it. So you need to provide some evidence quicker, and that could just be, how do you guys feel the change is going? 0 means it's horrible, 5 means it's going really well. So you rely more on kind of fuzzy measurements and metrics to show those quick wins. So your options will have a whole bunch of different combinations of things that you could do. And when you get to experiments, those are now the things that you've decided that you do want to do. And the subloop is basically, all experiments need some type of preparation, some type of planning introduced. That's when we're working on the changes. There's the idea of change saturation or change fatigue from the change world, that if you pile on too many changes, people will just be exhausted. Yes. Of course, some traditional approaches, that's the approach. It's called the spaghetti on the wall approach. The more stuff you throw at the wall, you're just hoping a few of them stick. And then review. So what happened? Did we prove our hypothesis true or false? Should we keep going down this path? Should we do something different? It's kind of the way that it goes.
This is so simple, but it's so powerful. I really, really, really love it. And
I can give you a quick story.
Go for it.
I'll share my screen and just show you a real example. So let's see if I can. I will share. And let's see. So the picture's coming through?
Not yet.
Try again. Share.
Okay, now it's coming.
Okay,
here it is.
So ignore the black marker. So that was just some random drawings. So here, the scenario is there's a program in a large organization that wants to go agile. Hi, we hear you're a coach. Can you come help us make this change? Pretty typical way of getting involved with something. So what would we normally do in the change world? Well, this comes down to a change readiness assessment. We go and we create some PowerPoints, and we create some strategy decks and some visions and all this other kind of stuff. And we spend a week or two doing all this thing. We sell it to top management. And then top management says, yep, that all looks good. Go ahead and do it. And then we go down to the team and we force them to work a certain way. So instead of going down that sort of, typical route, it was, you want me to help? Here's the barrier of entry. I need everybody who's involved in this program in the room at the same time, from the people who are writing code all the way up to the highest ranking stakeholder for a liftoff. The highest ranking stakeholder, which could be VP or SVP level, they never have a lot of time to attend these things. So for me, they need to be there for the first 20, 30 minutes just to sort of explain why we want to do this. And then we'll take over with the liftoff. So what I had these guys do was, as basic as you can get with a change readiness assessment is, do you care about this? And how much time can you dedicate towards learning? So instead of just having them go up, so on the left axis there, I don't know if you can see the mouse cursor moving, but on the left axis is interest, from low to high. How interested are you in this? On the x-axis is time. So how much time can you spend towards this? To avoid bias and influence, instead of having them mark an X on the whiteboard, I said, take a sticky note, draw the X and Y axis, and then put a little X where you would put your sticky note on the wall. Give it to me privately, and I'll go put it up on the wall, because I'm sure lots of people on this call have seen things, whereas if the boss goes first, everybody follows the boss.
Yes.
And I put this on the wall and said, what is this data telling you guys? And more or less, they said, we think we're ready, let's do it. So in 20 minutes, we did a change readiness assessment. And then we went to, great, now what does this mean to us and what are the actions we're going to do? So like I said, it's action biased, but it's still using all the stuff you need to do with change. Is the team are the people who have to live with the consequence of deciding to do this, not me. I'm sort of there as a facilitator and a guide to help them through it. And I did another one in the same organization. They had all their sticky notes right in the middle, which means they don't care. And I said, sorry, I can't help you. You're not ready, and walked out. And it wasn't it was left as, you're just not ready for whatever reason. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with me. Let's just not do it because my gut tells me that it's probably not going to work because there's not enough interest. And we left it as that. That was it. So that's
this is very powerful.
You can't learn. You can't learn that from a method. It's more or less you have to get into an action biased mindset, so you can prove that you, as the change person, you're there to help them and help facilitate the change, not manage and control it.
This is very powerful. I saw it already 3 weeks ago when I was in London taking the course. You showed it at that time with when Hitcher was teaching it. And very powerful, and thank you, because tomorrow I will have a session in the client, and now you gave me a great idea, so I will use the same. So thank you so much for it. It will help me a lot. Cool. So I had some questions for you, but I will jump a couple of them because I think we went into other direction, which I find much more interesting. We went much more into practical things, so it's fine. We have a lot of quite many agile coaches and scrum masters in this webinar. Could you give us some example? Okay, you already gave one super cool example right now. But could you give us another example how lean change management approach could help them as a scrum masters or agile coaches on their daily jobs?
Sure. One thing that I was missing when I first started as a scrum master and a coach was being aware of the rest of the organization. So if anybody has heard of disciplined agile delivery, they call that enterprise awareness. So yeah, your agile team needs to be aware of the context that it's in and what is around it. So if you're working, on something that's highly regulated, then your auditor becomes a member of the Scrum team. So bring them into the process. So open your eyes up to what's going on in the organization and invite them in. So back in probably in 2008 or 9 or so, working with an organization, before even the book, we had a pilot team that was getting started with Agile in a big telecom. And what I ended up doing was I invited every outside stakeholder group to our first demo. I invited marketing, legal, audit, finance, everybody. Because back at the time, the only thing I really had was, Scrum values transparency. So I thought, what would be better than inviting everybody who has, some input into our product into the demo so they can see what's going on. Open the kimono, as it's sometimes called. And it worked really well because our corporate trainers kept coming back, and we actually helped them incrementally create the training documentation by reusing some of the test automation that we created. Mm-hmm. So instead of doing this 8-month-long project, throwing it over the wall and saying, "Here, enterprise, it's your problem," we opened the door and we invited them in to it. So what a lot of the stories in the book and the things that I write about, it's how you're almost like a neutral facilitator. You're not there to control it. I've worked with some agile coaches where they actually define the team's Kanban board and make swim lanes for all the team members and make their workflows explicit without actually talking to the team. That's not the point. The point is you're there to help facilitate and be an independent arbitrator almost. So the book gives a bunch of ideas for how to provoke those conversations. If you're getting started with Agile, really my personal opinion of what I think Agile should look like in this organization is almost irrelevant. I will poke them and I will challenge them, but ultimately it's their company. They need to decide. So by using the loop, you help them explore options. So if there's a bigger company that sees Agile as a set of processes, and that's all they can't, their brains just can't see the mindset, the value stuff that I personally believe, I'll poke them, I'll challenge them, we'll come up with plenty of options. If they choose to go down the process route, then I'm like, great, go hire a process consultant. You don't need a coach. You need somebody to help you with process. So it helped. I find that it gives you explicit tools and stories to help help organizations figure out where they want to go and why, instead of just constantly cracking people over the head with the agile stick, which I did a lot early on in my career.
Let me share my story as well. How lean change management changed completely the way how I was helping organizations. If you remember back in 2014 when I started to play around with it, I was struggling a lot, and most of the organizations struggle a lot with the retrospectives. So when I mean they struggle a lot with the retrospectives, I want to say that teams go into the retrospective, they identify a lot of problems inside of the retrospectives, but a lot of the times the problems are outside of the team control. So it's very, very hard for them to actually solve those problems because they are organizational impediment problems. And so for you for you guys that are listening, some of you were in some of my retrospectives classes, and I teach that this stuff there. I was struggling with the way how to solve impediment on the organization level. So at the time I created something that I called organization impediment board. And it was basically a hypothesis Kanban board for the whole organization. So I ramp up a Kanban board, and the teams, Scrum Masters and the teams were feeding that board with the problems that were arising in a job retrospective, on their own job retrospectives, but they could not solve because basically it was outside of their control. And then basically I brought a bunch of managers, and at that time even the executives, the CTO was super involved in that. And basically we started to draw experiments and ideas and options to start tackling those problems. And little by little, a lot of the problems started to get solved. And I love this approach for several reasons, because you find a way to solve organizational problems. You communicate openly to the organization about the problems that the organization is facing. And very interesting that very few people actually think about is a lot of the managers nowadays are very insecure because Agile and Scrum comes and there is no clear definition what is the job of an Agile manager. And at that time, a long time ago, Deming was already saying that the job of a manager is improving the system, but what the heck does it mean? And with this kind of approach, actually, we give a purpose back to management, and we give them a really cool job to help the organization to improve, to help the Scrum Masters to improve, to help the teams to improve. This becomes so successful that actually yesterday in Romania, I talked with one of the executives that I worked in the past, and he literally told me that he's actually bringing that idea back to the new organization. So it seems that it's really picking up. So it's the second organization is bringing that ideas of impediment, Kanban, hypothesis boards to his current organization. So it's something very, very powerful that I highly recommend. Something super simple that anyone can do, but something extremely beneficial for the organization.
Cool. Very cool.
If someone wants to start with lean change management approach, where do you recommend them to start? Of course, read your book, because in 2 hours the book can be read. It's super simple, super well written. Thanks so much for this contribution. It's really, really great stuff. But imagine they read the book, and what should they do after?
So the first question I like to explore is why do you want to start with lean change management? What's working and not working about the current approach for change? What's missing? So what do you hope to get out of it? So kind of the ideas of taking practices from different communities and blending them together, which is shamelessly stolen from Jürgen Apollo and his Mojito method, right? Taking a bunch of different ideas and combining them into something new is more powerful than the original ideas. Take an idea from innovation games, which is now called Contineo, and draw a little picture. So draw a picture of what do you think will be better in the organization 6 months from now? If you've successfully implemented lean change management, what would that look like and why? And then you can start to think about why you want to do it. So starting with purpose is always the place where I go to. When people write to me and tell me stories, they always get started usually with a change canvas, some form of it. because they need something real, they need something actionable, specific, and tangible to get started with. So they use the strategy canvas to provoke the conversation, and they always customize it a little bit. So because you're always starting from a change that's already in progress, there isn't kind of a logical starting point for it. So they like to either start with a strategy canvas or a force field analysis or a team level canvas, and almost intervene and reboot the change a little bit. So we've tried this other approach for a while. We want to try this new approach, and here's how we would get started. So we need to get the people who are impacted by the change in a room doing a facilitated exercise and conversation around the canvas. So that's probably the most typical, because it gives you a lightning rod for a conversation, especially if a lot of people are given change projects where it's just their secondary job. They might be a team lead, they might be senior developer, but they're kind of asked to make agile work or make Scrum better, whatever it is. But change isn't really their thing. If they've got a canvas to start with, they at least have something to focus the conversation around. So they either get started with that, and in larger organizations, they tend to ask, how do I sell this approach to my leadership? How do I sell them that this way is better than the other ways? And for me, I flip the question around. I'm like, you don't sell anything. If your job is to facilitate change, you facilitate change the way it's going to work. And if you think this approach is better, you don't ask for permission to do it. You just do it. You start with, well, what do I know? Start with insights. What do I know about where I'm at right now, and where do I want to be? Now, what experiments do I think are going to get me there? Put it on a Kanban board, put it up on the wall, and start. So again, push into action faster, as opposed to trying to sell it and put it into strategic pillars and right. But definitely, the core idea is the people who have to live with the consequence of the change have to be involved in creating it. A friend of mine, Jill Forbes, she wrote a couple of posts for the website, and I interviewed her on the podcast. She said, the people who write the plan don't fight the plan. So get out of the way and facilitate it, and let the people who have ownership over the departments and the systems, have them create the plan, and you're just acting as the tour guide for them. So you don't really have to get permission. You just start facilitating versus managing.
Yes, it's very, very, very important. And another thing that was a kind of a life changer for me. It's something very basic, but it really changed the way how I see change. Was when I learned the co-creation part, and when we did the exercise in London about the changes that people imposed on us, the feelings that we got, and the changes that we imposed on ourselves, and the feelings that came from it, and realizing that everything which is imposed on us drives a lot of really negative emotions, and everything which is we impose in ourselves drives very positive behaviors. And that for me is, every time someone asks me how should I start a change, I say start it with others. Do not try to start on your own, otherwise you will fail. And if I look back to my career as an agile coach, the biggest failures I ever had in my life was when I tried to do it on my own. I started, I have a great idea, this organization needs this, and Louis started to do everything, and at the end nothing worked. And then when I go into co-creation mode, and I sold my vision and what I would like to achieve with the others get to buy in, and then basically magic happens. It was something super. So for me, when people ask me how should I start, for me it's always co-creation. Always think about co-creation and start to poke the system, but always make sure that you create something together with others. Super important. Cool. Could you give us 2 or 3 examples when the outcome was not that great? Those are the interesting stories.
Where the outcome was not great?
Yes. Those are the interesting.
Yeah, I won't.
Why did it not work?
I won't name any names, but a
No.
large organization had wanted to make this 1,600 person department more agile. So they had an enterprise agile group. There were 9 large divisions in this company, and all of them were kind of operating at different levels. And this division had not done really anything yet. They had a couple of maybe pilot projects, but that was all. So they wanted to give all those guys all the agiles. So I said, all right, well, here's what we need to do. So I went in and had a couple of conversations with the executives there about the approach, and it was the same co-creative approach that you just described. Was the first we need to do is go on an exploration mission and try and find out what's going on at the ground level, where people's brains are at with this agile stuff, what kind of work are they doing, and try and explore where can we go on our own, and where do we have to adhere to the enterprise agile people's framework, which was quite rigid at the time. And so I did what I normally did and started out with let's do some lean coffees. So printed out some signs, put it around the building, and the first one, no one showed up. I went, okay, well, it's the first one, big deal. So I figured, well, I found out that the room I had put on the printout was, it's kind of a lounge area. There's comfortable chairs and tables and stuff like this. So I said, in the lounge on the 9th floor in the northeast corner, we're going to do lean coffee. 4 people went to a different location. So that's why nobody showed up. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, crap. All right. So what's that area called? So they gave me the real name of the room. So I went around the building and I replaced the signs with new ones. And the second time, no one showed up again. So I started poking around, and they said, well, some teams have their daily meetings. Not all of them were agile. So one team had to stand up and the rest just had a regular daily meeting with their managers at the same time. I said, all right, well, I'll do it at a different time. So I tried a different time. Nobody showed up. I tried 7 experiments, and the only one person showed up because he was visiting from the UK, and he just happened to run into the sign and wanted to see what it was all about. But it's the first time that a co-creative, pull-based approach, absolutely nothing worked. Zero. Nobody cared. So I started poking a little bit more, because the first thing our brains go to is, why are those people resisting? And it turns out that this company had some internal policy on training that you get points for going on certain types of training. So basically, nobody's going to go to these informal chat sessions because they don't get points. they don't get credit for it, for number one. And so
serious.
We got to a point where I tried a whole bunch of these types of pull-based experiments and went and talked to people. I mean, I got connected to the auditors, I got connected to facilities, I got connected to all those people that were trying to create collaborative spaces and stuff, but made no traction. So I went back to the VP and I said, you know what, nothing is working here. So if you really want to make this work, you're going to have to assign 2 people from each subdivision to be your agile change champions and put some Newtonian force behind it. Personally, I don't think that's going to work. You might get a little blip, but if people don't really see a need, it's probably not going to work. And just nothing worked, and I'd left. That was it. So for whatever reason, it just wasn't the right time for this particular division. I probably wasn't the right change person. They probably needed more of a project management, creative big plan, force people, push, which is not my style. So I think there were just a bunch of factors. The industry they're in is one, because it's a high pace, high stress, thou shalt deliver at all costs type of culture. So there is no time for learning. And yeah, 0 of it worked.
Yeah. That happens. Jason, we are reaching the quarter to 10 here in Europe. And we can jump into the app that we gave at the beginning, but since I'm checking a question from Tom, which is extremely relevant to what you just described. Could we just pick up that question? Basically, Tom is asking, what about organizational readiness? Are some organizations more ready for lean than others? Do you want to pick that up?
Sure. Yeah, I think so. I think just depending on the style of the leadership in organizations, some are definitely more ready for an experimentation mindset to try things out as opposed to others. I had one person come through a workshop and said the opposite, which was basically management has a bad word association with the term experiments, because when you experiment, things blow up. So that approach was not right for them. There's too many factors to list. I mean, market is really important. If you look at the banking situation in Canada, there's the big six, and our banking environment is different from other countries in the world. It's referred to as an oligopoly, which means basically these big six don't really need to outcompete each other. They just need to protect their whole ecosystem. So the pace of change is excruciatingly slow, and they all do the same thing. It's the same with telecom in Canada as well. There's the big three, and they more or less just follow each other around and innovate the exact same way. There's really no need for them to drastically change what they do, because especially in telecom, there's anti-competitive laws. So you are restricted on certain things that, like, you can't undercut pricing is one example. So it depends on the market that you're in, the industry that you're in, how disrupted that industry has become. All these are really talking about urgency or purpose or a reason for the change. And all organizations are kind of at a different spot. One of the big telecoms I worked for, their mission statement from the CEO was, shame on us if we're not leaving our competitors in the dust. So companies doing great, making tons and tons of money, but it's not good enough. We can't let our foot off the gas type of thing, which was sort of his to the moon and back statement. I think pockets in organizations are always at different levels of readiness. Maybe as a whole organization, they're not ready, but there's always going to be certain pockets inside the organization that want to change how they operate. And, that little diagram that I showed is one way to explore that, which kind of fits into, I think somebody had another question about that one as well. What happens in a small number, when a small number of employees are ready, but other significant group is not ready for change? That's a good question. So I like to, Benjamin Franklin had a really interesting quote, which I use in a lot of my talks, which is, there's three classes of people in the world. There's people who move, there's people who are movable, and there's people that are immovable. So the people who are ready are the movers. They're the ones that are going to take whatever this change is and just run 100 miles an hour with it. And then there's the movers. Those are the people that are sitting on the fence. They want to wait until somebody else does it first to see if that other group gets in trouble before they jump onto this change. And then there's the immovables. Those are the naysayers. Those are the people we label as resistors. And, they'll be the first people to opt out. So if there's a small number of movers, what's the influential reach of those people? So the people who are ready to do this, is it people who have no political clout in the organization and no say in what their team does? Change probably isn't going to happen, because, like it or not, it's social and it's political. So your relationships matter. The people at the bottom of the organization who have been there for 10 years and have worked in 5 different departments have a lot more power and influence than the C-level in some cases, because they know how things really work. We overestimate the need for top-down support when all the support really happens from the people at the bottom who know and can influence other people. So if a lot of people aren't ready for the change, one example, a telecom I worked in, we went with the movers. So we went with the people that were ready to change and wanted it. So they're asking us, please come in, coach us, give us everything you got. We'll follow, we'll do what you say, we'll do this. They really wanted to do that. So we went in and we would coach those teams. And then when the second wave of teams came along, we would go in with a different stance. We would come in as a trainer. So here's mechanically how things work. Now I want you to talk to this other team, and they're going to tell you some stories about how they got this to work in your dysfunctional, broken organization. Because they're not going to listen to me as the external, but they're going to listen to another team of people who are part of the tribe. So that's kind of the natural way that influence works. So try to find who are the people who are motivated to do this for whatever reason, help them run amok in the organization and help them. I only work with movers when I do coaching. I don't try to overcome resistance. I don't work with the fence sitters. I go and transfer as much as my knowledge and skill with those movers. And then they know the organization best, so they know how the influence works. Yeah,
they will share it internally. Cool.
And it's more satisfying too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Do you want to take a look into Slido to see what we have there?
Sure. I will just share my screen here and put them up. There's a few. I saw a few. I was flipping back and forth, so I saw a few come up. So I think, yeah, we have time to go through these from top to bottom, I think. The top one was how to combine linear change methods like ADKAR with agile projects, releasing every X sprints, or just don't. Depends. I mean, if the story I told where we had invited everybody from outside of the Scrum team to come to our demos, if the change management team is following ADKAR or any other linear model, it's the same thing. Open the doors up and let them come in and see the process, and then work with them to help prioritize a backlog. So, I've worked with companies that do software in, online learning systems for universities. They can't just release every sprint without any kind of business readiness. They have to do something else different. So invite the change people in and let them manage their business readiness stuff however they want, but at least keep them aware. Get it? The A in ADKAR is awareness. At least make them aware of your backlog, what it is you're doing, what your release plan looks like, and then shuffle things around based on what they need in order to get the business ready for whatever that change is. So just invite them in. Often agile teams see change management as the enemy, so don't come in and tell us how to organize our backlog. Everything is about the team, and they kind of go into protector mode where I have to isolate the team from these evil change manager people, but bring them into sprint planning, bring them into backlog grooming, and bring them into demos. Keep them apprised of what's going on and learn to compromise when you need to. That's always the way it's going to work from what I've seen.
Cool. Thank you.
Making things transparent is not always loved by traditional managers. Any advice on making things transparent? Have a point to it. So sometimes making things transparent will be highly disruptive. Kanban likes to say it's evolutionary change and it's non-threatening, but as soon as you visualize work, you've basically threatened everybody who's responsible for that work. Somebody's going to point to a sticky and say, who's responsible for this? Why isn't it done yet? So I am always a fan of make everything transparent at the start. The company that I mentioned where nothing seemed to work, we visualized all of our work on a wall, but because the VP was based in another country, nothing ever happened unless he was there. So when he came back to visit the office, a week every month, people just totally freaked out. They're like, oh my God, we have to get the walls updated. But they didn't care. They didn't want to use it. But I am a fan of if you can't see the work, you can't manage it. But, I worked in one company that was doing a reorg and they're letting people go. No, you don't want a sticky note of all the names of the people who are being fired up on the wall. So use a bit of common sense. But don't underestimate the power of making things transparent, because the best thing that it will create is a conversation. Somebody's going to look at a sticky on a wall and go, they can't do that. Who's responsible for this? And while it's seen as a negative, it actually provokes the conversation that you want to provoke.
It's very powerful.
The key thing here, that not being loved by traditional managers, has to be that manager's idea. I told the story in the book that we let our big visible wall die for a few months because no one was using it, and we weren't maintaining it anymore. And then one day a group of managers were having a conversation in our room, and they said, maybe we could use this wall to sort of visualize all of our work. Then they owned it. So, if you're the coach or the scrum master, and by making something transparent, you're basically telling a manager they're doing a crappy job by doing it, that's not cool. You need to have that conversation in a private room and say, I think we need to do this for these reasons, and here's how I can support you through it. but just doing it without the conversation, I mean, that's why a lot of managers have a bad association with Agile, because we don't have waterfall coaches, right? Why do we have Agile coaches?
Mm-hmm.
So, who stands to gain and who stands to lose when you make stuff transparent? They need to be involved in making the work visible.
Yeah, cool. So then it changed some changes.
So we'll go. Benz has 2 votes. How do I get an organization's change managers who are emotionally wedded to waterfall change management to move to this? There's a few sneaky ways you can do it. One is you can accidentally leave the book behind somewhere where they're likely to discover it.
That always works very nicely.
That's often referred to as the creepy stalking method of influencing people. Another one, actually, I recommend Heather Stegel's book more than my own. It's called 99 Ways to Influence Change. And it's literally, that's what it is. It's 99 tips, really small micro interventions to help influence people for change. I actually went through this in a large organization a couple of years ago. And funny enough, this organization is now coming to me asking to bring a training course in there. You can't really force people to do something you want them to do. There has to be a reason why. So I like to say, look for the window of opportunity to open. Odds are, if these change managers are attached to their waterfall methods, they will be thrown into an Agile project at some point. And I'm seeing this all over the place. I mean, Google Agile change management, it's everywhere. So once they're thrown into the situation, then they care. And then now you can go, oh, well, here's something you could check out, a different way to apply Agile and Lean towards change. But you can't force anybody to do something they don't want.
Yeah. So first is done, second is done.
Okay, so I'll export the list as well. So we've got, about 3 minutes left. So I'll maybe get through one more, and then I'll just do a quick video on the rest of them.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Jason.
A team needs to make decisions, but sometimes you feel the team needs a push in cases. So how can a coach or scrum master push in the beginning of the transformation? You feel the team needs a push. That's a good one.
Yes.
So it's yeah. For me, it's balancing the pull and push. Where I mentioned the movers, movables, and immovables, there is always someone who is an advocate for this change. You need to find out who they are and who they can influence, and sort of follow that path of influence. Sometimes it's dealing with any emotional baggage if they're having a hard time getting stuck with the transformation. Sometimes it is finding people in other companies who've gone through the same thing and arranging a video chat with them so you can hear stories from other people who've already been through it. Either way, there needs to be some intervention to get people over whatever's holding them back at the beginning of a transformation.
I was thinking a bit. I like an exercise that a lot of people know and a lot of people don't know, which is the Constellation. And basically, Constellation is a small exercise that you can do with the teams, where basically you put an object in the center and you put the team around, making a circle around that object, and then you ask questions to the team, and stronger they connect to the question, they move closer to the center. Less they connect to the question, they move further from the center, and you can play around with those kind of questions, because a lot of the times you as a scrum master or an agile coach might note some things, but the team itself does not note those things that are happening. If you think about a couple of questions that you feel that are important, and you ask the team and let the team answer in that way, they are going what in team coaching, systematic team coaching, they say rebuild the system to itself. So basically they are talking to each other in a no community, in a no verbal way, but they are creating awareness of where are the colleagues, and that can actually start the discussions. And if you ask a question, do you think that there is no need for any kind of change? And then you see immediately who is pro-changing and not. And then you can just go deeper and deeper, and then you can start to create discussions between peers, and then you can continue from there. That's something that sometimes I did in retrospect, is to start changes inside of the team.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Jason, before we finish, I want to say thank you so much for joining. It was super awesome to have you here. I love these webinars because they are extremely practical. I think we gave some tips, especially you gave a lot of tips for people to start and to explain them. What was it? And before we finish, I want to help you and help me. So I hope that people liked, but for the ones that attended this webinar today, I have a special coupon. So I'm ramping up a bunch of lean change management trainings now in Europe. And for everyone that attended this webinar, I'm giving 20% discount to you guys. So if you go to our website, you have the calendar, and if you select any of the events that are there, you will be driven to Eventbrite, and if you apply this code, you can get 20% discount and attend any of my workshops. That was a special offer for you guys. So once again, Jason, it was super awesome to have you here. It was a pleasure. It's always nice to hear your experience and your examples and your tips. So thank you so much. Do you have something else that you want to add?
No, thanks for having me. I will. I'm going to export the rest of the questions from Slido and a couple in the chat, and I'll just post a quick 15-minute off the cuff kind of answer session for those two. So I'll send those to you, and if you're going to send a wrap up email for people, you can put that link in there too. Yeah.
Yes, and some people ask if, because they join a little bit late, if there is a replay. Yes, there is a replay, so it's recorded. And most probably, I need to check, but most probably if you go to the URL, the initial one, then you will be redirected to the replay automatically. So I think you don't even need to do anything. And basically you just join normally like you joined today, and you get everything. Okay. So Jason, man, it was really, really a pleasure. Let me stop this presentation now to say goodbye. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having. I hope now I don't want to take too much time. Your kids most probably are back home, so yeah, I want to give the time to play with them. Thank you to you. Thank you to the old guys. At the end, at the peak, we had around 70 something people, which means like more than 35% of everyone that subscribed, which is very, very high. I think was one of the highest percentage of attendees that I got until today. So it was really cool. So yeah, thanks, man, and we will talk soon. And if you need something, guys, Jason, just drop me an email and we will figure out something. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks.
See you, man. Bye-bye.
Bye.